Move west, young man. Get a job, get an oil field job, get that money, and then come back east. It's one of those conversations you have with anybody out east. The job market after graduation is tough. Imagine applying for a call center job and you're competing against guys with business degrees and history degrees and literature degrees. And I've just got my filmmaking degree, my media degree, a minor in psychology, and I can't even get an interview at a call center. I started my own company. I was doing deliveries for this third party company delivering medical equipment between hospitals. I'd pick up shifts at the arena. I'd be building the rink, tearing it down, and building the basketball courts. I even got work in a tire yard, just stacking tires from shipments. But after 2 years of sitting around working for minimum wage and sometimes below minimum wage and cash jobs, there was an ad in the newspaper that caught my eye. $10 an hour. Doesn't seem like much now, but back then minimum wage was, I don't think it had even hit $7 an hour. It was probably about $6.85. So $10 an hour seemed like gold, really. I called up the phone number, I did the application process, I did the criminal record checks, and I thought I'd secured a job. I was going to do something in the seismic demolition field, some field work. It was a little bit unclear. What they said was, "Hey, great, you've got some computer skills. We'll get you over here. We'll get you trained up. You've got to come in for a full day of training, get all your certifications, your awareness, your H2S, all these courses that are kind of required before you step onto the oil field, so you don't kill yourself or kill somebody else." It was probably January 2nd. I set out on this long ass drive from Fredericton, New Brunswick to Calgary, Alberta, almost 5,000 kilometers. I set off on one of the worst days too. It was started snowing in Fredericton. I got into Montreal. It was a very slow drive. I was in a little four-wheel drive sports car at the time, little Subaru SVX, nice and nimble through the snow. But when the snow's 7 and 8 inches, higher than the clearance of the car, it starts getting a little rough. You're slipping and sliding. You're trying your best to stay on the road. Pulled over in Montreal to reconsider life. Had I made the right choice? Was this something worth dying for in this terrible weather? Could I call in and maybe say, "Hey, it's snowstorming. I thought I'd be there in 5 days, but it might be 10." It's the age of crappy cell phones too. I had a little, I don't know what they're formally called, but the Nokia brick. Had one of those little blue Nokia phones, so no reception, no internet either. I didn't have a data plan. And I didn't really know anybody in Montreal or anywhere along the way to Calgary. So I kept driving. I kept driving overnight, as slow as can be, as cautious as can be. The time that it usually would take me to drive from Fredericton to Toronto, um, in less than one day had taken me almost 2 days. I kept trucking on into Thunder Bay. It was the first time I had seen a road where the snow buildup was almost a foot and a half tall. I was driving in the ruts of a transport truck at the bottom of my car, kind of scraping against the snow. 40 kilometers an hour for several hundred kilometers one day to get through to Sudbury to Thunder Bay. Finally, outside of Thunder Bay, the snow let up for a little bit, but the temperatures dropped. I'd have these little power naps in the car for about an hour and then I'd just keep rolling on. Roads were icy. There weren't even too many cars on the road. Nobody was that stupid to drive from the East Coast to Alberta at the first week of January. It'd be suicide. Getting into Winnipeg, I thought maybe I'd check this town out. I'm on the highway doing about 110, 120. Probably a little bit faster than that. Not trying to incriminate myself here. And then out of the blue, a red light. Traffic lights in the middle of the highway. Clearly the signs that would say slow down your speed were covered in snow. I thought I was going to die. Slammed on the brakes, tried to get it right before the red light. The car wasn't slowing down at all. I was probably still doing about 60 by the time I got to the red light. And green, finally Turned green right as I slid through. Near miss. Certain debt. Might have crapped my pants at some point. Never again, Winnipeg. That drive forces you through the city as well. I'm driving through looking for a motel or something on the way trying to continue to the Transcan. I figured if I got a cheap motel, I would stop in. All I could see were these zombies walking around, a lot of crackheads everywhere. It probably wasn't even that late. It might have been 6 o'clock or 6:30, maybe before 8. It was a little bit scary as well. People were just like knocking on your window when you stopped at a traffic light. I peeled out of there. I just kept going. So long, Winnipeg. Let's see what else is out there. Manitoba is pretty flat as well. You know, all the stories that people tell you about Manitoba and Saskatchewan, you can see for kilometers and kilometers. It's true. You can see some kilometers. You know what? If that road is clear, you give it a little bit more pep. You get up to a nice spot and hope you don't get stopped by a cop or anything. Entering into Saskatchewan, I don't remember if it was Saskatoon or Regina, but I really desperately needed gas. It was the first time I'd ever seen the gas light on that car. So in the entrance of town, I could see gas stations on both sides, but I was kind of separated by these massive snowbanks. I could see the roadway, but I couldn't figure out how to get in there. Turns out this is the old Saskatchewan trap. You gotta take the turn into the roadway that says Gasoline Alley. I was so naive. I'd never even seen of these things. You know, I was accustomed to the East Coast where everything was easy on, easy off. You'd get gas stations on the left side and the right side of the highway. I turned around, did an illegal U-turn at some point in one of the service routes where it says, do not turn here. Coming back down, still missed that turn. Turned again. Coming back down, missed the turn again. Frigate, I says. Right through a spot where the snowbank was at its lowest, just barely skidding through, almost got stuck. Got into the gas station, top. See you later, Saskatchewan. I wasn't having any of that silliness anymore. Finally through Saskatchewan and into Alberta. I had no idea how long I'd been driving. I hadn't seen the sun some days. It was so overcast and snowstormy. But I must have made up some good time just driving nonstop. Pulling into Calgary, I pulled up to a gas station, had a quick power nap, and headed off to the office to get registered and do all my paperwork. Got to the door, doors closed. Look at my phone, realize I had gotten there a whole day early. So I'd camp out in my car for overnight. It was about -20. Man, was it ever cold. I had a sleeping bag set up in the back seat. It's a coupe, so the back seats are 2 bucket seats. Worst sleep ever. Woke up, my back was aching. Got up, stretched out, and went to see this person about this job, this computer technician, whatever role for the seismic company. Little bit of hesitation. She leaves, she comes back. What was your name again? Randy, I'm supposed to be starting on January 6th. I got hired by Christina or whatever her name was. Oh, we have no clue who you are. Christina's on maternity leave. Turns out Christina had gone on maternity leave and didn't leave any files for any of the new hires with anybody else. Nobody had a clue who I was. If I could just log into my email, I could get you the email that tells me to be here. No, you can't use our computers. You'll have to pull it up on your phone. Or did you print it out? Did you print out your offer letter? Had no answers for this, but I just really wanted to use a computer. I just really wanted to get in there, use a computer, and show them that I was legitimately supposed to start working. After about an hour of sitting outside waiting for somebody, they finally came in and they said, well, we got a bus leaving at 6 p.m. If you do these tests, you could go out there and be a laborer. And then we can try to get this sorted out and find out if Christina left any notes with anybody else. I'd be thrown to the wolves like a piece of meat. Got inside, logged onto the computer. I figured I could stealthily get into the Hotmail. Hotmail was blocked. I couldn't prove who I was. Couldn't even prove the job offer I had. So I did all the tests, passed with flying colors. I didn't do drugs at the time, so I passed that as well. I didn't even have a drink for a week, so passed that as well. Passed all the tests, passed all the orientation. 6 p.m., get thrown on a bus. It's going to Fort McMurray. Got my gear out of the trunk, left the car at that office. Into the abyss I go. In Fort McMurray, I'm picked up by a guy in a truck. This guy makes several stops at casinos and hotels and random places. I'm just supposed to sit in the truck and wait for him to be out. Drive through Fort McMurray, we get to Fort McCade or some random camp. I believe it's the Shell Camp 2. I do a quick safety orientation and get some gear. Backpack, hard hat, coveralls, boots. Oh, we're fresh out of boots. I hope you bought some. I had some construction boots, but they were not made for -40 weather at all. Part of the agreement with camp jobs is they supply all the gear that you need. The hard hats, the coveralls, the snow gear, the boots, the warmers, the mitts. You're going into some Arctic territory here. You need some top tier gear. And the plan was that they would take it out of your first paycheck. These guys were so disorganized. For anybody wondering, the company's name was DGC. I believe they had a couple deaths on site. One that I personally possibly witnessed. And they filed bankruptcy and rebranded themselves to Veritas. Veritas is Latin for virtue or truths. It was one of the most bewildering names that I'd ever seen them come up with, trying to cover up some field debts. We go out to the field. We get orientations on how to prepare, how to do the job. It's a truck of smokers. I'd quit smoking 2 months before. Here I was just hotboxing it in a truck full of cigarette smokers, and from time to time you get the whiff of marijuana. Apparently the crew leads don't get tested. They're allowed to do whatever they want. They just sit in the truck all day. Their only job is to pick you up and drop you off. The average day started at about 4:30 a.m. You didn't shower because you didn't want your skin to freeze. Clean shaves weren't a requirement back then. Nobody had really done gas fitting. The gas mask fitting, where you put those gas masks over your face and you've got to be clean shaved so that you don't die of H2S poisoning. That came about afterwards. You get your gear, you throw it in the truck. By about 5 o'clock, you'd head out to the Shell Camp A. They had the fancy stuff. They had a cafeteria. We weren't allowed to sit down and eat. We'd only get sandwiches to grab and go. So you get a couple cheese sandwiches, a couple ham sandwiches. If you're lucky, there'd be a tuna sandwich left over. Grab about 4 or 5 of those and you're heading out for the day. You're driving even more north. So about an hour later, closer to 6:30, 7 o'clock, you're actually getting to site. This is when your paid time starts. Laborers aren't unionized, so you don't get paid when you get picked up to go to your shift. You actually only get paid when you get to site. You sign off on a check form that says that you're fit for work, which means that you have no drugs or alcohol in your system. One of the weirdest systems I've ever seen. On this site, if you had drugs in your system, you got a paid day off. You get standby fee. So if the rate was $10 an hour, you'd probably get about $3 an hour to just sit on your ass back at the camp. If you had alcohol in your system, or you had alcohol in the last how many hours in the dry camp, you'd actually get fired immediately. So drugs, okay. Alcohol, too bad, so sad. Now the job I was doing was field work for a seismic crew. So basically they have these line crews. One person goes and they kind of clear this path and put some markers. This person goes with a big box of cable on their shoulders and they unwind this cable and lay it on the ground. And then this other guy comes in and connects them. Another guy comes down, drills some holes, and they throw the geophones in there. My job was the cable box. I just walked through the snow with this giant box. The great thing is at the end of the 4 or 5 kilometers that you're walking, it felt like 4 or 5 kilometers. I don't know how much cable is in that box, but it felt like a good 50 or 60 pounds. But you keep walking, that cable box starts getting lighter. However, most of the times at the end of the shift, you're kind of winding back up that leftover cable. So when you're burnt out and tired and hoping to go home, you're kind of got to put a less bounce of effort into that to get that cable wound up. Somewhere between all the smoking and not having a safety guy on site and breathing in a lot of funky smelling fumes, We didn't even have gas detectors on our ankles. This is how bad this company was. Once again, that company, DGC, aka Veritas. At some point, my nose was going crazy. I could not breathe. They were stuffed. From that stuffy nose, my throat started closing up. I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even sleep. Finally, one day I'm doing the fit for work test, and I try to mumble to this guy, dude, I don't think I'm doing so good here. I don't know what it is. You guys have got us out there. We don't have gas meters. There's all sorts of weird scents. I'm getting like nauseous. They agree. They'll take me to the hospital. I get into the hospital in Fort McMurray, kind of tell my story to the emergency room folks. They get me a doctor. They put me under evaluation. Put me on some oxygen. My sinuses are clearing up. My breathing is getting a little bit easier. And that's it. Clean bill of health. Back to work you go. I said, no, man, there's like something out there. Like, we don't even have a safety guy. I don't know what gases are affecting me. What happens if I go back out there? That's all they could do. Give you a clean bill of health. Back to the truck we go. Back to camp we go. Obviously, I'm with the sketchy crew dude. So he stops back in at the casino. I'm just sitting there in the truck. Goes to the hotel for a nap or something. They're checking on somebody, probably to get laid with a hooker or something. I mean, these guys are real sketch bags. Get back to camp. Now, it hadn't occurred to me, but the cabin, the Atco trailer that I was housed in, was right next to the sludge pond and backed right up against the diesel trucks that were running 24/7. I was under the assumption that I was getting carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide poisoning, and that's why my throat was closing up. As a naive East Coaster, I kind of try to figure out a plan to get me moved to the main trailer that has a better HVAC system. And that's kind of shut down because I guess this is where the new recruits go, to this shitty Atco trailer just off the side. It's the least desirable sleeping location on the entire camp. I managed to grind it out until we got break and returned back to the city. Back in Calgary, I saw one of the most amazing things ever. The -20 snowstorm and snowbanks had all disappeared. It was the end of winter. So strange, the end of winter in February? I was experiencing one of those marvelous Chinooks. Probably the best one I've ever seen. It was probably about 15 degrees all week. Our city accommodations was the Travel Lodge near Chinook Mall. There used to be a Future Shop back then, if anybody remembers the old Future Shop. That 1 week flew by so quick. It wasn't enough rest. Right back up to camp we go. And here's where it gets a little bit dicey. On my first stint for the 21 days, I'd noticed that our safety guy, our crew leads, everybody else, they were up on the high banks. They were just parked in their cars, having naps, smoking dope, possibly drinking. Who knows, man? While the grunts were all down below. No safety gear, really. Faded reflector vests, no gas sensors. I still didn't have proper boots. When I was in town, I tried to get some better boots, but they weren't working. My toes were numb so fast. On this one day, we were laying the lines. We were going back to the usual routine. We're a little bit lower than we usually are. It's kind of setting off the spidey senses between myself and the guy that's closely following behind. Just a little bit up ahead. Looks like one of our buddies is taking a nap, but he wasn't napping. We're a couple kilometers away from the nearest cars, from our safety guy. We don't even have goddamn radios. Veritas, aka DGC. Remember that company. Buddy behind me is the quick thinker. He obviously thinks it might be the H2S. How long has this guy been down there? We don't know. He was only a little bit ahead of us. Usually you're about 5 minutes ahead. So maybe we could do a rescue. We didn't have gas masks. We didn't have anything. Now the way H2S works is on inhalation, you may succumb to some paralysis. But if you hold your breath, you should be fine. That was the logic. So Buddy's got the plan. He's going to grab him by the overalls and yank him out of there. I'm going to yank him even harder. So we've got this little daisy chain of yanking going on, and we could pull this guy up. Now, the thing about H2S is you kind of know if you're going into a deadly zone because the guy in front of you kind of falls over. If he's a few feet below, you kind of know where that gas is sitting. H2S is a very heavy gas, so it sits down low. What this guy was doing, maybe he tied his shoelaces. I mean, we were still up there. We didn't want to go into panic mode. So we hatch this plan. Buddy grabs him, I grab him, yank, pull him right up the banks. Less than 10 seconds. Our breaths are held tight. We finally get to breathe. Those 10 seconds felt like minutes. Now we have to jog a couple kilometers, get to the safety guy's truck. Safety guy's just sitting in there having a nice nap. We bang on the windows, we get him out of there. I still remember that dude's name. He was a guy from Montreal. Yves, or Yves. Y-E-V-E-S. I couldn't tell you his last name. But that guy should have got fired. Instead, me and Buddy got fired. We went against safety protocol. We attempted to save a life when it wasn't safe to do so. It was one of those moments where you kind of thought you did a heroic deed. You realize how stupid it was. But you probably shouldn't have been fired for it. I never got closure from that incident. I didn't know if that guy died. I don't know what happened. The very next morning, the crew lead took me and Buddy in the truck, drops us off at the casino. This is one of those stupid things. He's obviously going to the casino. This is the quality of leaders out there. We're trying to make our way down to the bus depot so we could get some tickets back to Calgary. We didn't even get money. We didn't even get return tickets. We just got dropped into town. Got a ticket, headed back to Calgary. Picked up my car, back into town. I got to figure out a plan. It's been 2 months now, just under 2 months, and I'm fired. I don't have enough money to get back to the East Coast. Basically, your first 2 paychecks go into your boots that I never received, your jackets, your coveralls, your hard hats, your backpacks, everything. They charge you about $2,000. So after tax, my first paycheck went to that, and my second paycheck was just a couple $100s. East Coasters are like meat in a zoo. Out here, it's a different world, man. If you can survive, you can make a lot of money, but you've got to have a good plan. You've got to save up. You can't be addicted to drugs. You can't be out there drinking and gambling every day. You got to stick to that plan. I've been here for almost 20 years. I am saving up, but the time it took me to rebound and get past minimum wage jobs was almost 15 years. Your credentials, your East Coast education, your university degrees, they don't really mean a whole lot out here. Back in Calgary, I'd regroup. Luckily, I had a friend who was away. He hooked me up with some keys to stay at his place for a couple months until I could get an apartment and get a more stable job. I really wanted to get back into the media field. And I was working construction, demolition, sweeping construction sites, taking anything I possibly could to try to save as much as I could. Around my neck, I kept my iPod. It was one of those first generation iPods, the 2 gigabyte hard drive. Had some cool tunes on there, but I also was foolish enough to put my entire portfolio of media related stuff, photography, projects, animations, short films. And this would be stolen one day. This would be stolen by yet another job site employee. The son of the boss of Alberta Demolition. I don't remember the kid's name. He's just a short, fat, pudgy little kid. You can tell his dad just kept him around to learn the family business. The dad's name was Brad Cates. He wasn't a bad dude, but through this incident, I realized that that entire family was just a bunch of assholes. The son was seen and confirmed seen by a couple other guys who quickly said, well, it could have been, or maybe it couldn't have been, maybe I didn't see it right, but in a shell building where we had our little corner station and with a locked door and locked cabinets, mine mysteriously opened itself up. There's only 2 people that have the master keys for that door. We get in the morning, we set our stuff down, and it's locked. So it's kind of hard that it just got up and walked out of there on its own. Called the cops. The cops couldn't get a confession out of any of the other guys that said, hey, we can positively identify this guy as the thief. So there's all my portfolio material, and I'm having a hard time trying to get portfolio material to go to interviews with now. It's a hard life in Alberta, man. The integrity and tradespeople, the integrity and the safety people. It was one of those things where you're coming from the East Coast, you're pretty sheltered, working with all these friends of friends who've got your best interest, or usually have your best interest at heart. And you're kind of seeing like the real world. The real world in Calgary, Alberta, it's a whole different jungle, man. This was my welcome to the Wild Wild West.